It was quiet. It was a quiet filled with trepidation. Uzumaki Naruto didn't like that quiet one bit. At least that was what the young man concluded as he sat down to gather natural energy, especially when it regarded something that he deeply cared about, Konohagakure. Last he saw it, it was not much more than a large crater on the ground. A barren wasteland, really. An empty area that once contained his home. The final clash with the leader of the Akatsuki was a very long and difficult battle, one that held very high stakes for both sides of the conflict. Naruto simply couldn't fail to defeat Pain. Everyone depended on him to win. He couldn't fail. He wouldn't fail. Eventually, after a long fight where the Kyuubi almost broke out of its seal due to the pain of losing another precious comrade, he emerged victorious. Defeating the last path of Pain with the last bit of energy he had left in him, earning Konoha's safety. Except his fight didn't end there. Only the physical portion, the easier part. No matter how he looked at it, the blonde was emotionally battered after fighting Pain. His home was destroyed, his loved ones either badly wounded or dead, his sensei, his master, Ero Sennin. He had to face the man that was responsible for all of his recent anguish and pain, to face him. For far more reasons than he cared to admit. For closure, for answers, to end this. All of this. Once and for all. A part of him was afraid though. What would he do when he faced the man? How would he react? After speaking to his father in his mindscape, he had to find out whether he could actually end the cycle that he spoke of, the cycle that helped to create this situation in the first place. Could he let go of the prospect of revenge when he met face to face with the man responsible for his suffering? So when he finally met the man he will come to know as Nagato, he very simply, almost lost it. This was him, the man who took away Ero Sennin, Kakashi-sensei, hurt his friends, destroyed his village, made him watch as another of his precious comrades fell to his ruthless attacks. Unforgivable. But he somehow managed to rein himself in order to listen to Nagato's story. To hear what pain he endured that made a student of Ero Sennin turn into this. He was glad that he listened. Nagato's tragic story helped give him the resolve to truly follow in his predecessor's footsteps. Naruto had no idea if he had the chops to do it, but now he was determined to follow through with his master's and father's wishes. The blonde would take up his father's dream, his mentor's dream, and bring peace to this world. Oh, he still wanted to be Hokage, and nothing was going to change that. But after seeing the after effects of what this cycle could do to people, a quicksilver image of the Uchiha crest flashed across his mind at that moment, hardening his already rock-solid determination. After seeing what hate could do to the person he considered a sibling. That's right. The young man murmured, determination stealing his voice. It's up to me now. I have to do my best to make sure something like this doesn't happen again. For everyone's sake. He would bring world peace, or his name wasn't Uzumaki Naruto. At least, that was the plan. After Nagato used the Gedo, Rinne Tensei no Jutsu, Outer Path, Samsara of Heavenly Life Jutsu, to revive all of the people he has recently killed after he attacked Konoha, Konan took his body to be buried. And so here the shinobi was, gathering natural energy so that he could gather Senjutsu chakra. So Naruto quickly entered Sage mode, using it to help him sense whether all the inhabitants of Konoha were alive or not. To his immense relief, he sensed the chakra of his many friends and comrades. Meaning that, a happy grin split apart his face, relief loosing the tension from his frame. They're all alive, they're all okay. Nagato did it. He couldn't help but fist pump, cheering loudly, celebrating by himself as he forced himself upright. More than that, he could sense Kakashi-sensei moving towards him, closing the distance between them with great speed. In a pretty damn good mood, Naruto moved to meet him, unable to wait for what he hoped was a hero's welcome back home. Then he stopped in his tracks, toad-like eyes turned to another section of the forest, wary. Something to his right sensed, off. What the hell is that? Naruto questioned out loud, unsure of what he was sensing. And where did it come from? I don't remember sensing this when I went Sage mode last time. The blonde just stared at that area, weighing in on how he should respond to this feeling. Honestly, after what he had just experienced, he wasn't exactly keen on anything that could possibly do damage to his already damaged village. And this feeling could just do that kind of damage. Or rather, he had no idea what it could do. And he'd much rather check it out and be doubly sure that what he was sensing wouldn't cause trouble than regret checking it later. So he did. Naruto turned on the spot and raced towards the sensation, zeroing in on it with his incredible sensing abilities. Moving at incredible speeds thanks to his senjutsu-enhanced body, regardless of his tired state, he was sure that, whatever it was, he could deal with it. That assurance was very much dashed by the time that he reached the aberration that caught his notice. In a small, insignificant piece of the forest, there was something that was really, really wrong. He was staring at it, studying it, suspicious of what it exactly was or where it came from. He couldn't really describe it, but if he had to call it anything, he supposed he would call it a fluctuation. As the very air that was emanating this sensation was shifting, as if space itself was rending. It was weird. Naruto already knew that Kakashi-sensei was coming towards him, so just in case this thing proved to be dangerous, the shinobi arbitrarily decided to check it out. Just a few moments ago, his teacher was dead. He was dead. He refused to place him, or anyone from Konoha for that matter, in danger. Especially after this recent ordeal. Bad mistake. The second that Naruto moved to touch the aberration, his hand was gripped by it, almost like he was caught in a vice grip. But the part that actually made him begin to panic was the fact that it began to pull. What the? Hey! Let go of my hand, damn it! Naruto cried out, as it slowly began to pull the blonde in despite all of his senjutsu-enhanced strength. He grit his teeth, smashing his feet onto the floor to slow down his forced movement, and even began sticking his feet to the ground with chakra. It wasn't enough, as instead of slowing him down, all his actions accomplished to do was drag the ground with him. The shinobi tried to think of a way out of this predicament, but since his hand was unavailable, he couldn't use hand signs to utilize his Kage Bunshin no Jutsu to help him out. Let alone a Kawarimi no Jutsu. His hands were tied, metaphorically and literally in a way. That sucked. Shit. Naruto couldn't help but curse as his entire body began to get swallowed up whole, enveloping him as his sight began to darken at the edges of his vision. One of the last things that he would hear from the elemental nations in a long time was Kakashi-sensei's surprised shout. Naruto was falling. He was falling very, very fast. The air that was rushing past him could attest to that much. The blonde tried to slow down his descent by flailing his arms, but instead all he did was force his body to twirl around more erratically. So he was obviously way too disoriented to make even think about using a jutsu to get out of this, and he couldn't even tell what was happening either, since the world was spinning around him so fast that he felt like he would vomit. He almost wished that he threw up instead of feeling the pain of crashing into the splash water. The body of liquid he landed in was sent splashing everywhere, going sky high from his impact and crashing against the area around it, overflowing a little bit thanks to the tiny tidal wave he created. Needless to say, the shinobi finally reached the end of his free fall, and he was overwhelmingly thankful that he had his sage mode on. Otherwise the fall could have ended up being a whole lot worse, and by that, he meant he would have ended up as a pancake. Not pretty. It took a few seconds for Naruto to poke his head up from the water, blinking rapidly in order to recalibrate himself to being upright again, before quickly taking a quick look around him to find out where he was. Trees, pavement, shell-shocked human beings. Was he still in Konoha? Or at least near the land of fire? Toad-like eyes shut themselves from the world as the blonde cursed under his breath, annoyed that he was sent on a ride into some weird area. Why couldn't he get a break? There's no way that I'm missing my hero's welcome Databayo. Naruto stated with resolve, his focus on his surroundings as he tried to find out where he was. That can't be right. Naruto snapped his eyes open and forced himself up, refusing to believe what his incredible senses were telling him. There was just no way. It was impossible. Yet his senjutsu abilities couldn't just be wrong, right? The simple fact was that, outside of the still blubbering people he terrified, Naruto sensed a lot of people close by. So much so that he felt like they could have made their own village, really. But that wasn't the issue. The problem was something else entirely. He couldn't sense their chakra. Correction, he couldn't sense anything's chakra. All humans had chakra, even if they weren't shinobi, they had it. Yet, for some reason, these people didn't. He should know. Ero Sennin made extra sure to jam that information down his throat. Bless his pervy soul. Anyways, Naruto couldn't sense a drop of chakra in anyone. which should be impossible because humans needed it to stay alive. It was tied to their life force, right? So the blonde quickly moved towards the shore, forgetting all about the pain of falling from who knows where and… Wait, shit, the young man cried out, snapping his head towards the sky as he tried to find out if that aberration was still there. Wherever he was in the elemental nations, as strange as it was, that thing could at least be used to return back to Konoha, right? Except he couldn't. Not anymore. To his dismay, he couldn't sense that thing at all anymore. It was quite simply gone. Like it never existed in the first place. Well, there went that idea. How the hell was he supposed to get home then? Okay, he had to relax here, and he had to think, what could have happened to make that rift in the first place? Maybe he could try and make one himself. Basically, what happened today that didn't happen on every other day? Oh, the shinobi realized in a eureka moment, slamming his fist into the palm of his hand. People who were dead were brought back to life. That didn't usually happen, right? So all he had to do to reopen that rift was redo that jutsu. And to do that, all he needed was a pair of Rinnegan eyes. Naruto nodded with a confident smile. Those were very easy to obtain after all. And since that was the case, he would get back home without much trouble. As if. Naruto roared out, slamming his head into the ground with so much strength that it created little spider cracks. He completely ignored the ordinary folks that he horrified by his actions, far too distracted with his own problems to care at that moment. Damn it, Nagato. Naruto groaned out from his spot on the ground, with faux tears flowing down his cheeks at his predicament. His senpai under Erosenin pretty much screwed him without realizing it, though it was also probably his fault as well. Probably. Did a jutsu that brought people back to life have such weird side effects? Or was it something else that he just wasn't seeing? He had no clue, and unfortunately for him, he didn't have any jutsu that could do something as ridiculously impressive as bringing people back to life. Okay then, plan B. He would get back home, by foot. The old-fashioned way it was then. Naruto finally forced himself up from the ground and immediately moved to resume his search, intent on finding out where he was so that he could have some idea of what he had to do to get home. The people that he accidentally terrified just watched the young man go, their collective eyes wide as he began to grumble to himself. No one would believe them when they told anyone else their story, so instead, a new folklore began on the very spot that the orange-loving boy landed on based on what the people there saw. The lake of the human falling star. It was a stupid legend, and everyone soon forgot about it. When Naruto finally saw the end of the tree lines, which itself signified the end of the park, though he had no idea it was a park, he grinned. Finally, he could see what he was dealing with. So he the blonde did just that and walked out of the park, eyes scanning to check the area. What the fuck is that? Naruto exclaimed out in shock, completely caught off guard by the rows upon rows of massive buildings that touched the sky. That wasn't the only reason why he reacted as he did, as the very people themselves that were occupying the area were wearing some of the most bizarre clothing he has ever seen. Well, sure, he wasn't the go-to guy to find out what the latest fashion was, but he was sure that this was bizarre for the elemental nations in general. Yeah, it was really strange. No chakra. Massive buildings, of which he's never seen before. Bizarre clothing, of which he's never seen before as well. A sinking feeling began to enter his stomach, knocking the air out of his lungs. Where was he? Because he was at least pretty sure that he wasn't anywhere near home anymore. And that realization stopped him cold, his expression going blank for a few seconds. Just as quickly as he went blank though, the young shinobi snapped out of it and coughed, a smirk interlacing his features. Fine, the shinobi said with that very same smirk. If life wants to throw me for a loop, then I'll let it give it a shot. But I won't give up quite that easily. That was right. He's faced bigger challenges than this, and he has come out on top. He wouldn't get crushed by this, definitely not. With that determination in his hands, he glanced about himself, his confidence shaking slightly as another problem just hit him. Great. He had confidence. So what now? How the hell was he gonna get back home? Oh. Naruto piped up, answering his own question. Information. He needed info, and fast. To that end, the blonde quickly shuffled out so that speak to someone, hoping that whoever he spoke to could help him out. The first one that he locked onto was heading straight for him, moving at decent speeds while moving a wheel inside a metallic object on wheels. Figuring that it was the only way to get his attention, the blonde ran in front of the, presumably, mechanical vehicle and waved his hands wildly. That definitely got the man's attention. Scree! The harsh sound of rubber sliding against concrete echoed around him, with the vehicle slowing down significantly before it could reach him. Beaming, Naruto walked up to the man, a question at the tip of his tongue. "What the hell are you doing, you crazy brat? Are you trying to get yourself killed?" So said the elderly man, apoplectic at the fact that a young man wearing a tattered orange jumpsuit ran in front of his car and nearly got ran over. But the spiky-haired teen completely ignored that, instead opting to ask his questions in a manner that reminded the normal human of a machine gun. "Hey Ji-chan. I got a few questions for ya. Do you know where I am? Do you have any shinobi around here? What about a village leader? Or rather, do you have a map, 'cause that could actually be helpful." Wait. Before you answer that, can I first ask why you're using this thing? Couldn't you move faster running? I mean, yeah, you're pretty old, but I think you could use the exercise, Ji-chan. The elderly man heard exactly none of the questions that the blonde was spitting out. Instead, all he heard was, "Ji-chan, listen you rude brat." The normal human growled, annoyed at the teenager with terrible fashion sense. "Move the hell out of the way or I will get the cops on your ass. Am I understood?" This shook Naruto out of his not-so-subtle admiration of the car, as his impatience pushed him to begin inspecting the not-too-common sight of a vehicle. Especially since it was never really used for transportation back at the elemental nations. Actually, now that he thought about it, maybe he should avoid drawing attention to himself. Except he didn't realize that he was doing just that by both stopping the elderly man by running in front of a car, and continuing to molest the car in front of him. When the elderly man growled in anger again, Naruto took that as his cue to leave before he drew more attention to himself. So after walking away and letting the man go, the shinobi quickly decided that he needed to get information from another source than other humans. As it was obvious that he was gonna make an idiot out of himself at this rate, he would get back home. He had many promises to keep, as well as many people who were counting on him to bring peace to the elemental nations. More than that, he still had to become the Hokage. That's right. Naruto resolved, clenching his fist and sending it to the sky. "I always keep my word, that's my nindo. And I will never give that up." And with that proclamation, the blonde brought his hands together to make a cross-shaped hand seal. He would learn more about this place, one way or another. At least that's what he said 2 months ago. Gah, just thinking about it pisses me off. Naruto complained lowly, his shoulders hunching over in his failure at getting back home. Yes, roughly 2 months has passed since the blonde first entered this strange land. With no way home in sight. On the bright side, he did manage to find out where he exactly was. To summarize, he was on an island nation called Japan, which was located on the Pacific Ocean near the main landmass of Asia. A continent that, Naruto slapped the front of his forehead, groaning at the fact that he almost did it again. Damn clones were too zealous with their search, and he accidentally got the same information several times over with different clones. Which meant that that specific line was stuck in his head whenever he thought about the word Japan, which was located on TH. Several pedestrians were shocked and a little worried about the strange young man that was currently bonking his head on the wall of a building. It took a few more bonks to get back to topic. When the blonde managed to stop, he continued on as if he wasn't just slamming his head against a wall. Anyways, while the clones were getting information, Naruto himself decided to be useful and try to get some money. He couldn't live off of an empty pocket after all. He did some odd jobs here and there, which eventually forced him to create a new team of clones to henge into different people to get more money. As he very simply wasn't making enough with jobs that had bosses that didn't ask too many questions. The plan worked beautifully and he eventually got himself a decent-sized home for his new base of operations, through means that probably weren't entirely legal, but at least he bought the damn thing. So no harm, no foul, right? At the very least, he didn't have to spend time in the parks anymore. The police kept kicking him out of the place. He had no idea that sleeping there would cause people problems. It was called a public area, wasn't it? Damn. He was still bitter about that. He felt lied to. Next time they shouldn't call it public if that was really the case. Anyways, he also got new clothes to better fit in with the people around him. Orange jumpsuits just weren't in fashion. A shame, really. No one could appreciate his tastes. They'd catch on though, he was sure of it. Nevertheless, he now usually sported a plain black t-shirt, a sleeveless burnt orange hoodie with a personalized red swirl at the back, dark blue jeans with a black belt, and a pair of white and blue sneakers. He tended to wear fingerless black gloves to complete his setup, just in case. Naruto was still Naruto. And Naruto sometimes got into some trouble, usually with some punks here and there. Outside of some small scuffles though, he pretty much stayed low, and it seemed like he would stay that way. At least that was the case, until recently. Unfortunately, while taking orders, a policeman entered the little restaurant where a clone of his was working as a waiter, while not wearing a henge, much to the blonde's simmering annoyance. That was the beginning of the end of his relatively free and peaceful life, made worse when he realized weeks later that he never questioned the events that were about to take place properly. But that was, obviously, something for later. The policeman apparently noticed how young his clone looked, and mentioned that he should be at school right now, pushing him to go despite any and all protests. At the time, his clone was horrified that he would be forced to spend money to go to school when he was working already, let alone the prospect of going to school at all. But, very simply, the policeman would have none of it. If he was caught again, then he would get fined, and if he got fined, then he would get a record, which meant that he would be in the system, and that definitely couldn't happen. So after grimly realizing that the cops in the area now probably have a rough idea of how he looked like after that, and that there was no way that he could permanently have a henge up whenever he left home without messing up once or twice, he decided to just go to the most dreaded of all institutions. Kuo Academy was the closest high school available, and Naruto wasn't too picky, so he applied to go and was eventually accepted after forging some papers. And that was why the shinobi was heading back home, having woke up a little early to quit some of those odd jobs that he had before. He was heading back home to change into his new school uniform, preparing himself for his first day. The blonde almost vomited at the thought, already more than a little sick about the fact that he was going at all. Why does this shit happen to me? The teen wondered aloud, stuffing his hands into his pocket petulantly. It was a genuine question, with no real answer, as was the usual. Of course, after switching clothes to his stuffy school clothing, he began to make his trek towards his new and legal torture session. And, as per the usual for him, another problem became immediately apparent to him when he neared the horrible institution. Throughout the 2 months that he has been stuck in Japan, he has discovered a great many things that this world held secret. Especially from the unknowing human beings that casually lived their days in relative safe ignorance. It was probably better for everyone that way. Without any energy sources in their bodies, there was no real way of fighting back against other beings that did have such powers. Yes. There were other beings that existed besides the humans, staying hidden from them as much as he was. He discovered this fact completely by accident, mostly by accidentally entering zones where normal humans seem to avoid unconsciously. It probably had something to do with the barrier-like thing that they put into place when such fights began, of which he, in typical fashion, kept getting caught up in during his 2-month free roam. He still had no idea how he managed to remain anonymous after the first few brawls he got caught up in. He only knew of 2 groups so far, the people with the white wings and the people with black wings, which apparently hated one another. After hearing their hateful and biting insults aimed at one another, he eventually learned what they were called, angels and fallen angels respectively. Now, he didn't know why exactly they were fighting, but he was sure there was a reason. Probably. Nevertheless, the entire thing was bizarre, but at least it was good to know. There would be no unhealthy surprises for Uzumaki Naruto, thank you very much. Now, the problem with the school he was about to enter in, was the fact that the very area seemed to be teeming with foreign energy. Foreign energy that he was not familiar with. Basically, there were more than just regular humans in Kuo Academy. But he already enrolled by this point, and if he tried to back out now after he was already enlisted in the school role, then he would without a doubt attract attention to himself. Naruto clenched his fist, determination firing up his eyes as he made his decision while waiting to make his entrance. Since he couldn't force a clone to take his classes, for the obvious reason that any damage it took would make it pop, he would just have to attend this school normally for a little bit and remain anonymous. The blonde's ear perked up slightly when he heard his new teacher call his name from behind the door he was leaning on, giving him flashbacks of all of the times that Irika-sensei roared out his name in anger. Ah, good times. Now, Naruto, with his new academy uniform unbuttoned with an orange shirt under it, knocked onto the door to announce his entrance. Just like that book on Japanese etiquette told him to do. Ah, how proud Bachan would be. Same could definitely be said for Sai, for that matter. Enter please, Uzumaki Naruto, the teacher repeated from inside the classroom, tone impatient after having to call twice. Naruto just grinned in response. It was about time for him to make an entrance, one that would give everyone a good impression of him from the beginning. If he was going to do this school thing again, then he was not going to have a repeat of his ninja academy years, definitely not. So with that ambition in mind, the shinobi slid the door open and entered the classroom, making sure to take note of his soon-to-be classmates' expressions. Most of them were completely indifferent so far. Some girls gave him shy smiles and some of the boys gave him challenging stares for whatever reason. Weird. He didn't even do anything yet. The young man moved to stand in front of the chalkboard, preparing to give his introduction to what would be his class for the foreseeable future. Welp, he'd better make sure that everyone knew exactly what he was about. Yo! Naruto shouted without hesitation, an upbeat tone to his voice. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I like ramen, my friends, those who are friendly to me, and those who I consider precious to me. I hope we can all be good friends, and if not, I will just beat you up so we could become good friends later. Dadabayo. To end his declaration, he made sure to give everyone a thumbs up and a winning smile, blinding everyone there with his happy demeanor. Though their reaction was not what he expected, as everyone present gave him incredulous looks, while outright gaping at him for his unknowingly provocative speech. Did he say something weird? The teacher eventually got over his own shock and coughed into his hand to get everyone's attention. That was nice, Uzumaki-san. Now can you please take the seat next to Nanaka-san near the window? The shinobi just blinked at the teacher's total lack of enthusiasm but eventually shrugged it off and walked to the classmate he was directed to. Figuring that there were simply some people that he couldn't get a rise out of, he'd break him in, he was sure of it. The girl he was directed to go to was wearing the typical female uniform of Kuo Academy and was quite the pretty girl. It wasn't even something he noted out of admiration, it was simply a fact. She had neck-length light blue hair with a braid on the right side of her face and a white headband to keep her hair in order, despite the fact that she had a hogue on the crown of her head. Her vivid yellow eyes, framed by the soft features on her face, locked onto him as he was making his way towards her. The girl, Nanaka was her name, nodded to him in acknowledgement as he sat down to her left near the window. First impression, a good person. Awesome. Despite this positive development, he still had to actually listen to a lecture by his new teacher, meaning that he had to do his best to not fall asleep from the lesson that was being thrust to him. He failed utterly. Naruto woke with a start with some drool on his chin, his eyes snapping to check his surroundings, only managing to take in the empty classroom that he was occupying. Oh shoot. The blonde forced himself up, a little confused and disgruntled, until he realized that he wasn't alone in the small room. Blue eyes moved to the right, catching the calm and collected gaze of his new class neighbor. Whoa, what happened? Where is everyone? Naruto asked, his words slurred as he tried to wake himself up. He forgot how ridiculously boring school was, but he was sure that not even Iruka-sensei was that bad before. It was like watching paint dry with how entertaining it was to listen to the teacher's lecture. How long did he have to do this again? The period ended, Uzumaki-san, just now. Before he left, our teacher asked me to give you a little bit of a tour around the school since this was your first time here at Kuo Academy. Nanaka stated simply, that calm air of hers firmly in place. Wait, the period ended? How long was he asleep exactly? Wait, more importantly, he couldn't have this girl just follow him wherever. He had his own ways of finding out more about places, and he didn't need a babysitter. Namely, clones. But he obviously couldn't do something like that near her. Hey, don't worry about it, I can find my way around just fine. Naruto explained with a cheesy grin on his face, confident as always. He hoped that his words would convince the strangely stoic girl that he was fine, but his hopes were dashed by her next statement. I am the class representative, this is my duty, not a favor for you, Uzumaki-san, and I am adamant about completing my duties. Nanaka stated with her intense gaze staring him down. Naruto stared back, if only out of pure stubbornness, but he eventually gave in regardless. There was no point in arguing against something so small. He'd just let her have her cookie, and then do what he had to do afterwards. What did he have to lose? He would just be killing an hour, nothing important. Okay, you win, Nanaka-san. Please lead the way, Databeya. Naruto relented easily, offering a small smile in order to hopefully lower her tension. It didn't work, as Nanaka just stared at him for a few spare seconds before she turned around and grabbed her bag to leave. The blonde watched her go, sweat dropping at her attitude, but followed after her regardless. So Nanaka followed through with what she was assigned to do, taking him around Kuo Academy to see all that the high school had to offer. Introducing him to all of the facilities and important areas. Naruto had to admit, he was impressed at the sheer size of the place, even though it was ostensibly just a high school so far. Though apparently there were other parts of the academy that extended beyond high school, though he wasn't sure. The entire tour took only about a half an hour due to her quick and efficient introductions to everything they saw, causing him to suspect that she wasn't that much happier to be there herself than he was. It didn't really offend him or anything though. He has gone through much worse and learned to not take things so personally as a young adult. He was sure that his 12-year-old self would demand what her problem was with him though. Uzumaki-san. Naruto blinked, forcing himself to come back to reality as he realized that he must have been musing to himself for a while, since Nanaka was just staring at him, waiting for an answer to whatever she had just said. He took a quick look around and realized that they were at the rooftop of the building, with a beautiful view of the rest of the academy grounds available to them. Actually, why were they even up here? Was this a part of the tour? Naruto then turned back to Nanaka, who was still waiting. Sorry, I was just thinking about something. Can you repeat, whatever you just said? Nanaka sighed, but did as was asked and repeated herself. I said, is this a good place to stop the tour, Uzumaki-san? On much firmer ground now that he knew what was asked, he grinned and nodded. Yep. Thanks for showing me around the school, Nanaka-san. It was a real help. I'll see you around in class, alright? The shinobi was already in the midst of turning around as he was speaking, preparing to head out and escape from the confines of the school. He's had more than enough today. Wait. As demanded, the blonde did indeed wait, freezing himself from opening the door to enter the stairs to enter the building again. There is something that I wish to ask of you, Uzumaki-san. The young woman stated as much as asked, not exactly giving much room to deny what she was asking of him. Naruto turned around and looked at Nanaka, his own blue eyes connecting with her yellow ones, a hidden intensity hidden within their depths. Why was she looking at him like that? What are you, Uzumaki Naruto? Nanaka questioned, no, demanded with a new sharpness in her eyes and face. The shinobi took a step away from the teen, sensing some semblance of hostility from her, shocked at what she was asking. Indeed, her body took on a more aggressive tone as she spread her legs apart and clenched her fists, almost as if she was ready to fight with him at a moment's notice. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, Nanaka-san? I must have misheard you. Naruto tried to clarify with a newfound nervousness, trying to reassure himself that the girl in front of him had no idea about the fact that he wasn't a normal human. Nanaka was completely human, of that he had no doubt, so it was impossible for her to learn of his abilities, right? But what if some humans could? Did he do something that gave him away? And who else possibly knew of his unique power? This wasn't good at all. Don't play stupid, Uzumaki-san. You seem to be human, but the reported energy that you've been giving off suggests otherwise, and an unknown variable cannot be tolerated during this point in time. Nanaka said with growing antagonism, voice firm. As she was speaking, a green aura began to envelop around her arms, a sword appearing from the energy, as well as a pair of metallic gauntlets that formed around her arms. I will ask you one more time, Uzumaki Naruto, what are you? Nanaka finished, her newly formed blade pointing at Naruto. Naruto just stared at her. The blade she just created was aimed at him with ease and confidence, with the poise befitting of a warrior. He made a mistake. He spent so much time focusing on non-human threats that he completely ignored the powerful humans that hid among the weak humans. This blunder can only be described by Naruto in one word. Fuck.